head to create.org.au/snapthatstigma. Brought to you by Create Foundation, the peak body for children and young people in out-of-home care.
This has been another Edge Radio community service announcement. To promote your not-for-profit organisation or event, apply online. Go to edgeradio.org.au.
There is nothing wrong with your radio.
Do not attempt to adjust the volume.
We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
Welcome to episode 101 of Media Mothership, broadcasting out of Edge Radio Studios in Nipaluna, Hobart, Tasmania. On Media Mothership, we explore everything in and around the world of media, in particular how it can shape our understanding of the world around us. We're streaming on edgeradio.org.au as well as over at YouTube and Twitch. So if you want to find us, just search Media Mothership on YouTube or Twitch. We're also on the DAB. Message us in during the show if you have any questions via the chat on YouTube or Twitch. And feel free to SMS us directly into the studio on 0488811707. I'm your host, Craig, and today's topic is looking into the world of radio dramas again, going back in time to 1948, exploring a really fascinating little radio drama story from the X-1 anthology series. So we'll be unpacking that mainly in result of my current fascination with the Netflix series based on the quite well-known Chinese science fiction novel Three-Body Problem, which raises some interesting questions around a number of fascinating paradoxes, including the Fermi paradox. So let's explore some of these ideas of alien life through science fiction writing. Welcome back here. So we're exploring on Media Mothership's episode today a really interesting episode that we're going to dive deeper into from the world of radio dramas, and we're going to uncover some interesting layers and ideas within the story we'll dive into. So we're going to explore a really intriguing episode from the X-1 science fiction anthology series called Mars is Heaven by the well-known classic science fiction writer Ray Bradbury. There's some really interesting themes and ideas in this story around identity and nostalgia, and most importantly, I think for today's world, ideas of fiction versus reality. How well can we trust the reality we think we're seeing around us? We'll look at unpacking this through some really interesting cultural theories as well to see what sense we can make of it, where the significance of these series really helps us understand something maybe a little more deeper. So let's start by, I'll set the scene by getting us into the mood by playing the start of the episode. So we can, again, transport us back to 1948 when this episode first aired on the American science fiction anthology series X-1. This, in fact, was amongst one of their early episodes.
Countdown for blastoff. X -5, -4, -3, -2, X -1. Fire! From the far horizons of the unknown come transcribed tales of new dimensions in time and space. These are stories of the future, Adventures in which you'll live in 1,000,000 could-be years, on 1,000 maybe worlds. The National Broadcasting Company presents X minus one. Tonight's story, Mars is Heaven. When the first space rocket lands on Mars, what will we find? Only the ruins of a dead and deserted planet? Or will there be life? Intelligent life in some strange form that we can only imagine? Will we be welcomed with open arms? Or will the Martians treat us as invaders? Only one thing is certain. Someday, a giant metal ship will take off from Earth to travel through the black velocities, the silent gulfs of space, to descend at last into the darkness of the upper Martian atmospheres. And on that day, man will finally know the answers. The day we first land on Mars.
All right, so there we have the setup, the first 2 minutes from the X-1 Mars is Heaven story. And what we see that they're setting up here is this story of the first kind of manned mission, expedition to Mars. And it's set, this of course was written in 1948, and the year in which this adventure is taking place in the far-flung future from 1948 is, I think it was 1987 this was set. So he didn't quite make it to Mars by 87. But nevertheless, it's a story of the first mission to Mars. And as the story goes on, the crew of the spaceship, after landing on Mars, are amazed by their discovery of perfectly preserved 1920s American town that they found. They're expecting to see a kind of red Martian surface, inhospitable, but instead they're confronted with what appears to be an American 1920s city. So about 28 years before this story was written. This astonishes them, and they try to figure out, is this time travel that have happened? Particularly as they start encountering the population of the town, which is populated by their deceased loved ones. So their parents, their relatives, their friends who had passed away during their lifetime, but somehow have ended up on what they believe is still Mars. But it's an American village populated by their loved ones and friends and acquaintances who had died. So again, there's that idea of the story being Mars is Heaven. So at first they start thinking, and the population themselves say, maybe this is heaven, right? So initially the astronauts believe that they've in fact maybe reached heaven for somehow, in some cosmic way. People who have passed away on Earth have ended up reborn on Mars. However, in the third act, as night falls, the sinister truth emerges that the town, in fact, is a elaborate illusion. The inhabitants, everyone else, are illusions created by the Martians to lure the crew out and to create a false sense of security before ultimately killing them. So it's a really masterful story. We've got aspects, particularly in that third act, of horror and psychological suspense. And it's using these ideas of memory, longing, and most importantly, the dangers of blind trust, right? Why these characters start, particularly the captain, as very cynical and by the book, yet become seduced by the family that he encounters on Mars. So it's an eerie twist that I think really nicely challenges this core idea that has fascinated Media Mothership on this show for a while. We've looked at a number of stories and texts which play with our perceptions of reality through media, right? Virtual reality, in today's space, deep fakes. I noticed the ABC News radio station, I think local ABC Hobart as well, having playing these clips of the upcoming election cycle, creating a deep fake of Jackie Lambie's voice and seeing if voters in her electorate would be able to figure out that the message of Jackie Lambie petitioning the government to move the capital from Canberra to Tasmania in her voice, but they've created this little AI-created voice dub, is actually fake or not. So again, it's this concern over how trusting we are of the reality we see around us, how it can be manipulated, how it can be altered. And Bradbury's story back in 48 is quite a fun little short story that unpacks in the science fiction setting of these themes, these topics of being through memory, longing, wish fulfillment, the dangers of having a bit of blind trust. The other thing I'd like to pick up on is a little bit of context of the radio anthology series, golden age of radio period, so, 40s into the 50s of X-1. X-1 anthology radio series produced in America. It's really quite a significant series. I do encourage people to go and dive deeply into some of the great little stories in there. The first one is absolutely fantastic. Nothing Behind the Door? And it's a wonderful cosmic horror story, which we might get around to discussing in a future episode. But as this story suggests, the main focus of the X-1 series are science fiction stories, and they explore kind of either futuristic or speculative themes. So in this one, it's a first man mission to Mars and what they might encounter. We'll play some excerpts during today's episode, and I think you'll hear quite high production values that they bring to bear with some great sound effects, nice backing music, as well as the fact, as we can hear in this episode, it's adaptations or scripts of quite famous and renowned genre authors. So in this one, Ray Bradbury. There's also been stories from Isaac Asimov, Philip K. Dick, Robert Heinlein, which also are in these anthology series. So it's well worth digging into it to hear some more of these kind of innovative stories way back in the 40s and 50s that are immensely popular for their time and engaged really in being the popular culture of that time. And within that, of course, what we'll look at is some of the anxieties, the historical anxieties. If we're looking at something made in 1948, what type of historical anxiety that is in conversation with, and interestingly, how that also is maybe prescient or evokes or can communicate to some of the issues and concerns and thought-provoking issues we have today. So I don't think this hasn't aged badly at all, this episode, and we'll play some little clips to dive a bit deeper into. As I said, I was reminded of this episode as I was watching the very dystopic science fiction series, and I've started reading it as well, the Three-Body Problem, Chinese science fiction trilogy that tells, similar to this, of Earth's first contact with alien intelligence, and where that may or may not be to our advantage. And as I was digging into the Three-Body Problem story, one of the ideas which came up again and again was how it's in conversation with the Fermi paradox, which we'll get to later, a kind of classic science question about aliens and why we haven't encountered aliens yet, it seems. So X-1, really fantastic, nostalgic series that has a long legacy, very influential. This is an episode from it. Many people consider this one of the better episodes. that are in this anthology. As I mentioned, this episode aired in 1948, so I guess historically we're looking at a period just after the end of World War II in 1945 and the start of the Cold War period. So this butting of ideological heads between the communist bloc and the democratic bloc, the countries formed around democracies. So there's a lot of global political, social structure, cultural norm tensions that are happening this time, and probably predominantly this fear of nuclear annihilation, which was there as the Russians began to develop atomic weapons as well, the threat of communism, and within this, as we can see in an episode like this, a lot of optimism about technological progress. So the idea of this series, 1948, this episode aired, and it's set in a far-flung future of 1987, where we would have landed finally on Mars. So again, this, aspects of it are quite utopic in terms of that, but this is a quite dark episode by the end, as I've said, where the human crew, full of hubris, are undone. They're killed by the end of the episode. And I think that's a kind of in conversation if you think that in this episode, one of the core themes, one of the way in which the human astronauts are deceived was meeting nostalgic lost one, like their loved ones that had died. So again, this story that's based within nostalgia and loss of the characters being deceived by the feeling of loss that all these characters have, that when they're confronted with, I guess, if this is 1948, if you think of what that generation of the world had been through, Americans throughout the world had been through, we're looking at a period maybe where ideas of a peaceful past had been lost, right? In 1948, coming out of World War II, the devastation. It's interesting, one of the core characters, my favorite character in this series, Dr. Horst, is a survivor of Dachau concentration camp, and he's the only one that can see through the deception the Martians have had. So again, within this idea of loss, nostalgia, technological optimism, that by 87 America will have all these lunar missions and missions to Mars, but it's interesting that the Mars mission is full of anxiety and indeed a kind of cosmic horror they experience to their detriment by the end. So there's some wonderful kind of Cold War paranoia within this story, right? By the end, where the characters realize, or the only two surviving characters realize that they've all been fooled. This type of subterfuge they've realized they've been the victim of is classic Cold War kind of paranoia that I think this is in conversation with. Also, much like some really nice science fiction, so Three-Body Problem is a current dystopic vision from science fiction. Equally, this has a kind of balancing act between a utopic and dystopic vision that's being explored here. Utopically presenting this idea of a powerful American hegemony that's been able to make it to Mars, but dystopic in terms of the victim they fall into, the type of paranoia that they end up suffering by the end of it. So in terms of its historical location in 1948, it's a really interesting moment in time for a story like this to have been written. And you can see that it's very much in conversation with it. Much like in today, we have Black Mirror and other science fiction anthology series that are talking about psychological manipulation, the fragility of human perception. Similarly, this episode back in 48 raising similar issues. And you can see the kind of influence that Ray Bradbury's Mars is Heaven story that we're talking about here has bequeathed science fiction and discussion now. So I want to dig a little deeper firstly into some of the really interesting ideas and meanings that are in this story. If we think firstly of the type of America that's getting portrayed. So I'll play a short sequence here. This is a sequence where the astronauts have just landed on Mars, and they've started exploring to find their bearings and to explore the region immediately around the spaceship. And what they're confronted with there is this really fascinating, idealized version of mid-20th century American life. All right, so let's hear now the sequence in the first act. As the spaceship's landed, they've started exploring, and they've got this, I guess, invitation to adventure, where they're confronted with this thing they know shouldn't be there, an American 20th century house in Mars. So we'll see how the story unfolds with that idea. Here.
Iron deer sitting on a lawn in the middle of Mars.
I don't understand.
Look around. The mist's lifting.
Hey, Captain, look there. It's a house, a regular old-fashioned house.
But, sir, on Mars.
Good Lord. I haven't seen carved scrolls and gingerbread like that in years. Look at that port swing. The geraniums.
There. I told you it was a rooster, Captain.
Give me the glasses, Lustig. I want to take a look through that front window. Well, there's an upright piano. Some sheet music on it. Lustig, it's beautiful Ohio. It can't be, sir. Horst, do you think that civilization of two planets could be identical?
I don't know. That specific variety of geraniums is only 50 years old on Earth.
Is it logical that they should develop in Mars? How about that porch swing and the piano and beautiful Ohio? Why, it's impossible.
Captain Black, this looks like the town I was born in.
Well, it looks like my hometown, too.
I thought of something, sir. It's the only solution. Maybe we're not the first ship to reach Mars from Earth.
Don't be ridiculous, Lustig.
Oh, how else can you explain it? Suppose some scientists got together. They invented some spaceship and planted a colony here. That's the only answer.
That's impossible, Lustig. Been space travel, it couldn't be secret. Do you have any idea what ships cost, what industrial power is needed? No, there's got to be some logical reason.
I think perhaps we might find out, Captain. The light just went on in that house.
Kingston, cover that door with the machine gun.
Aye, sir.
All right, come on, Horst. We're going to ring that doorbell. There's got to be a scientific answer to all this.
All right, so fearless Captain Black, and Dr. Hurst, guy who's going to start figuring it out slowly, as well as some of the other crew members, have been confronted by what seems to be this typical 20th century American house, yet how could it be there in Mars? So what's really interesting here will be this conversation that they set up, and how they're falling into this illusion. So at first, they're kind of trying to struggle with why is this happening? How could this be happening? And we'll hear a little bit about how they'll start believing in this illusion.
And there's something moving in there.
Stand back, Horst. Give me a clear shot.
Are you sure a bullet can stop a Martian?
Steady now.
Can I help you?
If you're selling anything, it's much too early.
No, wait just a minute. What town is this?
What do you mean? Are you census takers?
No. We're strangers here. We want to know how this town got here.
Is this a game?
No, it's not a game. We're from Earth.
From where?
From Earth.
Do you mean out of the ground? Are you sure you're feeling well?
Madam, we came in a flying ship across space. We're from the third planet, Earth. This is Mars. Now do you understand? Mars.
You go away now, you hear? I'll call my husband from upstairs and he'll chase you. Go on.
But this is Mars, isn't it?
This is Green Lake, Wisconsin, in the United States of America. Bounded on the east by the Atlantic and on the west by the Pacific. Now go away. Goodbye.
Horst, do you suppose it's really possible? I've got to find out more about this.
I told you I'd call my husband. Now you go away.
You've got to tell me one thing first. What year is this?
Year? 1928, of course. For goodness sake.
You hear that, Horst? And we know it's 1987, and we know this is Mars. Horst, is it possible that we got fouled up, made some tremendous blunder, circled around, and landed back on Earth?
In 1928?
Well, maybe some switch in time or dimension.
Could we have shifted somehow, gone backward in time? Oh, Horst, this won't hold water. It's not logical. We checked every mile. We went past the moon, out into space. We're on Mars. Lustig out at point. Hey.
All right, so there they are, struggling to figure out how this idyllic American town is there. And as they're starting to figure it out, this construction of reality, we'll hear in this next section a really fascinating, as Bradbury, moment of Bradbury's writing as he tries to break through into the desires and memories of these astronauts rather than the objective truth. So it's a nice little first act script writing moment there where you see this objective truth, Captain Black, the voice of Captain Black we're hearing there, interrogating it, judging it rationally, saying this can't be happening. Rationally, you've got to understand how spaceships, the economy and so forth works. They can't just have somehow sent other human missions here that have somehow made an American 1920s village. It can't be real. Yet, as we'll hear in this next section, which I think really is a nice encapsulation of this issue of the struggle over the identity of these astronauts, whether or not they're a kind of homesick identity, longing for the security and safety of familiarity, or whether they're brave adventurer astronauts risking it all to Star Trek it and conquer and discover the universe around them. So in this next section, we'll have a listen to a struggle over identity as a character believes he's seeing his deceased ones, his loved ones that had recently passed away, but is, as we know, really seeing the replication of these loved ones by the Martians. And the struggle that Captain Jack Black has with the crew to struggle with this identity as they are, are they either Star Trek explorers or, sad, emotional humans who are longing for connection and familiarity after, however many years the voyage took them or months. So this tension really plays out really nicely around how fluid and how quickly the characters start losing their grip on reality.
Kingston in the rear. Keep that gun at half load.
Aye, sir.
First, there's got to be some cold, logical solution.
Captain!
What?
That house down the street, the white one with the green shutters.
Lustig, what's the matter?
I never thought of... Thank God!
Lustig, come back here!
He's running for that house.
That crazy fool, after him, quick!
Lustig, stop!
Come down off of that porch!
Grandpa!
Lustig, what the devil do you think you're doing?
Albert!
Grandpa, it is you.
Lustig, what is going on here?
Albert, it's been so many years.
How you've grown, boy.
It's so good to see you.
Lieutenant Lustig! Oh.
Captain, Grandma, I want you to meet my friends. This is Captain Black. Captain, I want you to meet my grandfolks.
Howdy. Any friend of Albert's is a friend of ours.
How long have you been here, Grandma?
Oh, a good many years, ever since we died.
Ever since you what?
Oh, yes, sir. They've been dead 30 years.
What?
Oh, now, don't you trouble yourself. It's all right. We're alive again, that's all.
Do you mean to tell me that Mars is heaven?
Oh, nonsense, no. All we know is here we're alive again. And who are we to question God's infinite ways?
Well, Lustig, we're going back to the ship.
But, Captain, I want to talk to my grandpa.
Lieutenant Lustig, I don't like any part of this. You'll come back with us if I have to club you and carry you.
Aye, sir.
Now, let's go. Heaven only knows what they've run up against back at the ship. Ship.
Looks like we're being welcomed with a celebration, Captain.
Celebration? They've abandoned ship. Every port is open. No guard set. You masters!
Hiya, Captain. Meet my old dad. Dad, that's Captain Black. He's not a bad guy for an officer.
Higston!
What's it?
Bring that band back. Use force if you have to.
Oh, excuse me, sir. There's my Uncle George.
Higston!
I'll be right back, Captain. Uncle George.
What the devil is going on here?
Understand, sir?
they've all found friends and relatives. They're all here.
Right, Captain. I found it. The whole crew's out in the crowd.
But I gave orders. Definite orders.
You don't understand, Captain.
I understand mutiny. I don't care how many relatives show up. I'll have discipline.
Johnny!
What?
Johnny, you old son of a gun!
It's you. Edward.
Yes.
It can't be.
Oh, of course it is. Johnny,
Ed.
you old...
Ed. Dr. Horst. This is my brother, Edward.
How do you do?
Hello, sir.
It's wonderful to see you, Edward. Look, I've got to get back to my ship.
Oh, Johnny, wait. I almost forgot. Mom's waiting at home.
Mom.
Yeah, and Dad, too.
Mom and Dad are alive? Then you're real, Ed.
Well, of course. Don't I feel real? How's that, huh?
Why, Ed!
We've got lunch for you, Johnny. Mom's making corn fritters.
Dr. Horst, haven't you found anybody?
No, Captain. I have nobody.
Oh, then you come on home with me, right, Ed?
Why, sure.
All right, and there we go. The moment in the episode where the rational skepticism of Captain Black, the only one that had been holding out with Dr. Hurst, skeptical of what they're seeing around them, has collapsed as the kind of American dream that they're presented with, this perfect suburban setting, and within that hinted at, because of their reuniting with dead loved ones, this idea of a promise of the kind of eternal happiness that they may have found with these loved ones. So, as happens next, Dr. Hurst and Captain Black get taken home to Captain Black's family, and we have this quite nice little critique, I guess, of this ideology of the American dream, where underneath this apparently perfect suburban setting and eternal happiness with loved ones is a very dark underbelly, that this perfect town is an illusion. And again, we'll explore why that illusion's there and why it would benefit the Martians. But it's a really fun, I guess, again, moments where you see these anxieties creeping in of, again, maybe a post-World War II era, a Cold War dystopic vision that this perfect life has irreversibly been lost. The experiences of World War II, the Cold War, the atomic bomb has rendered this as a fantasy, that the past, this nostalgic past with loved ones that have long passed away, appears to be a simpler and safer time, make America great again, but in fact, it's hiding a dark underbelly of deceit and not at all in your best interest. So as Dr. Hurst is invited back, we'll see in the dinner scene that we'll listen to now as we head into Act 3, the struggle between the American dream and our only character now, that Captain Black has been seduced by this simpler, safer past that the Martians have created. He's completely believed it. Dr. Hurst is the only one who hasn't any family and friends and happy memories after being liberated as a child from the Dachau concentration camp. So it's fascinating also that we have a character in 1948 in conversation with recent traumatic history of genocide against the Jews. That is a pivotal plot moment. He's the only one that isn't able to have his memories read to find a loved one to seduce him into the past. And within that, an interesting critique maybe of the peril, the deception as you're pursuing something that you want. So let's jump forward now as this struggle between the American dream that all the other characters feel they've encountered and this desire to protect yourself. So in this scene, we'll have Dr. Hurst.
Be with Edward.
So you could talk the way you used to.
Well, we can't put Dr. Horse on the daybed. I think we better...
So just to set up the scene, in this scene,
Macca's delicious new Biscoff range. Perfect.
No. In this scene, what's happened is that so they've had a wonderful dinner, and they haven't been able to trap Dr. Hurst. There's no one there that's been able to seduce him except for a fake memory, in a way, that gets explained in this scene. So they're just trying to figure out, do they go back and protect the ship, or do they stay in this house?
She's coming over here first thing in the morning. So you'll have to stay over.
Yes, but that settles it then. You stay here, Horst. You can bunk with me in my old room.
Yeah, but Johnny, we thought you'd like to be with Edward.
So you could talk the way you used to.
Well, we can't put Dr. Horse on the daybed. I think we better share the room tonight. Be plenty of time for talking, Ed.
Yes, I guess so.
I suppose I better drop back to the ship. You know, Ed, security check.
Why do you have to do that here?
I don't know, Mom. There's no good reason, I guess. Well, suppose we skip it tonight, huh? Well, good night, everybody.
Oh, it's good to have you home, Johnny.
It's good to be home, Mom.
I love that use of your kind of Leave It to Beaver, classic 1950s, late 40s, suburban ideal American music that we listen to there. And again, the idea that they've been completely taken into a mediated impression of what the American dream is, that except for Dr. Hurst, they've all been convinced by this illusionary American dream of idyllic suburban setting with a kind of promise of you will always be with your loved ones. However, in this scene, we'll see the importance of Dr. Hurst's character, which is kind of wasted, unfortunately, by the end of Act 3. Here we have a great scene as Dr. Hurst starts to figure it out, and particularly given his identity as a survivor of the Dachau concentration camp and the type of unique experience and perspective that brings, to be able to see through this deception and illusion. Because we can imagine, I mean, the reason Bradbury maybe chose a character that has this background is that from enduring the horror and the incomprehensible reality of human atrocity, that he's the character which has that deep-seated awareness of the cruelty and manipulation which is out there. He's the only one which is skeptical and is pragmatic about what's occurring and sees this as potentially a cruel environment, whereas all the other characters, and again, it's fascinating to think of exploring the outer space world, sees it much more utopically. We're in a utopia now, yet Dr. Hurst is the only one that begins to feel this is actually maybe a dystopia, and potentially drawing upon the horrors he experienced as a child in Dachau, and that historical context of World War II and the Holocaust, being in conversation with in this piece. So let's listen now as Dr. Hurst tries to put it together.
Captain Black, you asleep?
No, I've been thinking about what we were expecting. Green-skinned Martians. All the time there was only Mom and Dad and Edward waiting. That's funny what tricks your imagination can play on you. Well, I guess Mars is heaven, Horst.
You know, I've been thinking about Martians, too. Captain, just suppose there were Martians, and they saw us land, and suppose they thought of us as invaders. What would be the best weapon they could use against our atom bombs, huh?
I don't see what you're getting at.
They would want to disarm us first, huh? To wipe out all suspicion, to make us feel at home. Captain, suppose this house isn't real. Suppose the people are just images, stolen from our own memories by Martians, created for us by telepathy, hypnotism.
Oh, that's the craziest theory I ever heard.
Maybe that's why there was no one for me, because in all my life there is no happy memory, no real loved person, not even my mother. I don't remember her, only the piles of rotting corpses at Dachau. There was no happy emotion for these people to recreate.
How about that phone call? Anna?
Yes, Anna. I didn't remember who she was, but I do now. I just remembered. When I was freed from Dachau, sick, delirious, I raved about a wonderful, kind nurse named Anna that took care
Well,
of
there
me.
you are. It's logical. She's coming to see you tomorrow.
But there was no Anna. I'd been nursed by a man.
What?
Anna was only a dream. And there's only one way they could have learned about her, by reading my subconscious mind.
That's impossible, Horace.
Why? A whole crew was thinking of home. Suppose the Martians read our minds.
Yes, but if there are Martians...
If there are, they have us separated. Each man in a different house, sleeping, trusting. No one at the guns.
I left my pistol downstairs. Do you think there's something to this, Horst?
It's a perfect trap, Captain. Who would suspect his own mother, his grandparents? How easy. Just a knife in the heart of each sleeping man.
That's impossible, Horst. But we've got to get back to the ship.
Listen, the crickets have stopped. Come on. We don't know when they change back to whatever they really are.
All right, careful.
Where are you going, John?
Ed, we wanted a drink of water. That's all, Ed.
You're not thirsty, John. You don't want a drink.
Look out!
You don't want a
His
drink.
face! It's changing! He's a Martian! Run, horse! Run!
You can't get away, John.
This way, horse!
All right, and the fantastic moment of the twist being revealed, our characters realizing it's been a trap all along. Wonderful suspense building up there through the horror and suspense as really does reflect that anxieties that the longing for this simpler, safer past has been usurped by the anxieties of the life that this Martian town, they realize, is a complete trap. And it's interesting, again, you're drawing upon that kind of Make America Great Again vibe, this idealized past, suburban 1920s America. I guess it's not a Depression era America, but certainly the reuniting with loved ones, this type of idyllic American suburban setting, there's nostalgia for that. I guess ultimately it's a very nostalgic trap that's been laid, and they're clinging to that, the danger of wanting this unattainable ideal of being reunited with deceased loved ones, an idyllic America. It's a wonderful drama which I think upends this idea of pursuing your type of Star Trek New Frontier and instead having a experience of deception, that actually this environment and going into space is dangerous, that in fact we will not be met with hugs and embrace, but instead attacks. And again, thinking of the three-body problem idea book series, I was struck by the fact that many people have been exploring that idea through the Fermi paradox. So let's have a look at that Fermi paradox quickly now that we're at this scene where we realize that the Martians had simply always been there. Even though we didn't realize that Mars was inhabited at all, they'd been hiding, and then they'd launched a psychological trap that will decimate, will kill all the humans on this ship. So the Fermi paradox, really interesting theory from around this time, which said there's a paradox, there's a contradiction between what we know mathematically and scientifically of the universe around us, suggests there must be quite a high probability of some life being out there. Statistically, it simply must be the case there's life out there. Yet, if we accept that proposal that there must statistically be life out there because of the preponderance of inhabitable stars, or the statistically saying that there are a number of stars or planets circling stars that should have life, why is there no evidence for it? Why is there no evidence yet of life out there? And that is the Fermi paradox. Why is it that we haven't yet found life out there, or life has contacted us? And there's a number of theories around what might be the reason for that, if we accept that paradox. One, which is in a story such as this, is the dark forest hypothesis. And that's the idea that you can explain the Fermi paradox. Why haven't we yet encountered life, given statistically there probably is life out there? Is because other civilizations deliberately are remaining silent, because if you do let people know you're in the universe, you will attract hostile aliens. That it's a hostile environment out there. It's not a safe, welcoming environment. It's a hostile environment. And the dark forest is much like in hunters in a dark forest, stealthily and quietly stalking around other trees and so forth in the dark. If they see something, it's best to shoot first rather than risk not doing that and be attacked. So Mars is Heaven, this episode we're listening to now, it presents a similar scenario where, we've gone to Mars, there's been concern and anxiety. What will we discover? We don't know if there's life there or not. We've been deceived. The Martians cleverly have hidden themselves, and they've hidden themselves with a kind of psychological, deceitful attack that has made the humans believe that they're surrounded by other humans, lowering their guard, allowing themselves all to be destroyed, hinting again at this dark forest hypothesis that the world around Earth is actually hostile. And if you reveal your presence, if you go to Mars and reveal yourself and just kind of stumble along, hopefully, making friends along the way, instead, you'll simply be annihilated. And that, again, is one of the answers to the Fermi paradox, that the potential reason we've not detected extraterrestrial signals is because everyone's hiding. Everyone's hiding. Which the Martians are doing. The Martians are very cleverly hiding with these psychological virtual reality type attacks. And it's a nice little thought experience there from 1948. And again, if you're interested in similar dystopic answers to the Fermi paradox, I do suggest you go ahead and read the really interesting Chinese science fiction series, the Three-Body Paradox, or the Three-Body Problem, or the Netflix series from it. It's a fun, paranoid, contemporary story engaging with similar issues around, questioning the illusions that we're presented by, much like Mars is Heaven. Ultimately, there's some really interesting point there about questioning these illusions, trying to examine, like Dr. Hurst does, critically what these experiences are. They might be very comforting illusions, but is there a deceptive narrative within them? Particularly if they're coming from maybe a technology, an ideology, a political entity, what kind of questioning of this illusion, if it is one. Maybe emotional resilience. I mean, the character of Dr. Hurst being a Dachau survivor, experiencing the cruelty of humanity in that experience, giving him insight. But I guess more profoundly than that, seeing how quickly the other characters, the other astronauts on this journey were feeling alone, were feeling isolated, atomized, not part of a family network. And so when they were presented with a family network, they embraced it. So maybe mental health issues, right? How if we're not... I mean, I don't think the mental health of that spaceship was very good. If the characters so immediately embraced this fantasy, suggesting a huge amount of loss and longing that they'd experienced. And that could be in conversation with the immediate post-World War II America, the experience of loss, or around the world, globally, the sense of loss and the sense of never being able to recapture maybe something you feel has been irrevocably lost, the sense of family. And finally, this idea of vigilance, transparency, the dangers of believing in some of these depictions. These themes are also picked up in a couple of other types of series. I mean, there's the 2016 film Arrival, similar to Mars's Heaven. It tells the story of an arrival, in this case on Earth, of extraterrestrial beings and how the humans respond to that. That isn't a Black Forest response. It's a kind of miscommunication response. It's that the reason that Arrival postulates, I'd say, for the Fermi question is that we've just never been able to communicate and understand each other. That we have been getting signals, we've just not understood them. Annihilation, probably closer to Mars's Heaven in terms of it's this great movie from 2018 about the psychological and physical effects of encountering an alien environment, similar to the type of uncanniness which bedevils the crew of this first Mars landing. Those two movies, I'd say, are certainly worth checking out if you're curious about this Black Forest theory, as well as the three-body problem, and other kind of dystopic or cosmic horror type versions of alien contact. So that's pretty much brings us to this episode. Thanks for listening. This has been Dr. Craig from Media Mothership for another week. We'll just play, what do we got? A few minutes left, so I'll just play the final scene where Captain Black is made it back to the spaceship and is trying to warn the rest of humanity not to come to Mars.
John Black, the XR-53 calling for Mars. I've locked myself in the ship, but they've crippled it. I can't take off or fire the guns, and they're coming for me now, the Martians. I'm all alone here. All the rest are dead. Hinched and Lustig, Dr. Horst. Poor Horst, he didn't even reach the door. Listen, listen. They're trying to break through the hull. Edward and Mom and Dad and all the folks, but they're changing now. They're melting and changing back into... They're Martians. Can you understand? Martians, not men. They made us think that Mars was heaven and we fell into the trap. Can you hear me, Earth? You've got to stop the next rocket. Listen, tell my brother Will. Tell my brother not to come. They'll trap him too. They'll kill them all. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me, Earth? This is John Black on Mars. Hello, Earth. This is John Black on Mars. Hello, Earth. Hello, Earth.
All right, so that was X-1 with Mars's Heaven. You can listen to other episodes of Media Mothership, though, on YouTube and at edgeradio.org.au or via podcast. We're on Facebook and Instagram, too, so do feel free to reach out to us there. And next week, we'll be diving into some more fun media stuff. Next week, we'll see if we can line up a local Hobart musician talking about how they've created their kind of media music through YouTube and their recent experience in the USA. So that will be a fun interview next week. So keep listening now to Edge Radio with cool tunes and music.